Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Making Art in My Garage Late at Night. I've turned around this piece of wood that has the skeleton painting on it because the black is taking a while to dry, and if I take it off, I feel that I might get some kind of scratches or I might scuff the paint job a little bit, so I'm just turning it around and letting it dry on the back. I'm going to let it dry probably for a week or so, and I'll just use this side to paint on. Just as good. And what's interesting is that I've noticed that this piece of wood is actually warping. I put these bars on it. Oh, I say bars, but they're just wooden guide rails in the hopes of keeping it a little bit more rigid or straight or whatever, but they're just bending with this thing. It's a pretty heavy, thick piece of wood. I don't know why it's warping per se, but it is. And that's why when it's the other way around and I'm painting on it, it like wobbles a bit. Right now it's actually quite firm because it has 2 points of contact. When it's turned around, it just kind of rocks on this thing. So, yesterday we made this. I showed it to my wife and she said that it looks like one of the drawings that I would make if I was drunk. And she's not wrong. This does look like it was made by a drunk person. So, what are we going to do today? One thing that I have neglected to talk about is that when drawing on a vertical surface, my arm gets tired pretty fast. I don't know about you, but I can only hold my arm up and draw for so long. Painting, for some reason, doesn't trigger the same muscle ache as drawing. I don't know why. So when I was drawing this drunk person drawing yesterday, the first skull was very easy, and then I just realized that my arm was getting tired, and I just went nuts and have at it. I think what I want to try and do today is maybe go a little bit more simple. Just do something kind of more central on the paper and don't go too crazy adding too many elements. What my ultimate goal here with this project and why I do it every day is because I want to get into this kind of flow state how I was back when I would draw in a sketchbook every day, back when I was in high school or college. In those times, I would always carry a sketchbook with me to all my classes, and I would draw in every single class, regardless of what lesson was going on. A lot of my teachers actually didn't mind because I was fairly decent at drawing, and I would draw on my notes, and I would turn in the notes, and the teachers really enjoyed that. Actually, in high school, in my English class, I think the teacher's name was Mr. Buell. He let me draw on my desk, and he specifically addressed the whole class and said nobody is allowed to draw on the desks except for this guy, which was me. So I had a special privilege that I was allowed to draw on this desk, and it's funny because nobody was allowed to add to it, and by the end of the year the whole desk was full. I drew all over the entirety of that weird L shape, and he apparently unbolted the desk and he took it home and he has it hung up on his wall. In my history class, I would draw comics based on the lessons, and I would turn those in every day. And I remember I went to go visit my high school a few years after we had graduated, and I went to go see our old history teacher, and he pulled out this stack that, I kid you not, was about 1 inch thick of all my old notes and all the old comics, and he kept them all because apparently he loved them. Alright, so that's my goal, is to return to that flow state of just when I open up a new piece of paper or put up a canvas, I will immediately be able to start drawing and have something that I'm happy with. Right now I'm still in the state of complete and utter, I guess you could say, self-doubt, or just not quite knowing what to draw. And this is a really good example of that, because right now, because of that self-doubt and not knowing, I automatically default to this what is that, right-facing skull. The reason I default to that is because it's something that I know that I can draw easily and it will come out looking fairly good. It's just like a default warm-up kind of sketch for me. And back in the day, when I drew all the time, I did draw skulls sometimes, but it wasn't as common as it is now for me. So I'm going to keep going every day to the best of my abilities until I get back into that state. That's the goal. The goal isn't, as I've stated before, the goal is not to make money. It's not to cultivate a following on social media, because I've done both of those things and they were fun, but they didn't bring the kind of satisfaction that I desire. And I'm already getting the satisfaction that I desire, because when I do look at other people creating, before I would feel like I was sitting on my hands and not doing anything. This, what I mean by before is a few months ago when I wasn't drawing or painting regularly. But now I feel like I'm at least doing something. So step in the right direction. And that's ultimately why I'm here doing this. And the second reason is that I want to inspire you to start or continue your own creative journey. Because I just think it's important. I think that art and cultivating your creativity is a very necessary thing for your well-being. Because in a sense, as humans, we all have the ability to create. What we see, what we hear, everything that we interpret, we are able to process, and then we can regurgitate in any form. And that kind of unique ability to look at life and see our own truth, our own, to process information in our own way, is completely unique to each and every person. And I think that it's very cool and important to cultivate that, because being able to share the way that you process information with other people is very interesting. I think that art is a great communicator and a great conversation starter, as well as being fun to do. Well, it should be fun to do. If it's not fun, then you might be doing something wrong. But then again, there is no wrong way to make art. So maybe if it's not fun, that's great too. Anyways, I'm going to get some materials up and together, and then I will see you soon. Okay. Alright, well I've zoomed in here on this. I hope that the camera focuses here. I never know if it really is or not. Anyway, what to draw? Let's just do a simple cowboy skull. See if I have any cowboy reference images here. Here's this guy that we used. These are just some printouts from my computer. I have a black and white printer, and if I don't use it regularly, these white lines start appearing on all the images, which reminds me I have to use it because I haven't used it in a couple days. Alright, here's a good cowboy hat image. Here's a couple actually. I'll put my gloves on just force of habit. Well, they're both good, but this one is the one that I choose. Look at this gentleman here. That's a nice hat. So I keep four thumbtacks in here. I should keep at least one more or two more. I have a jar in the other room. I say in the other room. By the other room, I mean the house. We'll put this gentleman up here. Alright. And what's always nice is for some words to accompany the image. But I don't have any right now. Maybe I'll think of some along the way. One thing that I'm really bad at is getting the image to not be too close to the edges. That's one thing that I struggle with. I guess we could file that under composition. I am terrible with composition. Unfortunately, being a self-taught artist, there's a lot of things that you don't learn until you know about them. And I never bothered to look into or figure out anything about composition, which is just silly because good composition is the backbone of a nice looking piece of art. It's what gives it structure. It's what gives it the flow so that your eye travels across it. It's sometimes the embedded code that lies within the piece. So, like any stable genius, I just never looked into composition because it's something that I just wasn't aware of. But like I said, being a self-taught artist, I just carried a sketchbook around and I drew in it, and that was the extent of my learning art. I tried to get into art college, I think I've probably mentioned before, but I didn't have a portfolio, so they didn't let me in. I was standing there shouting, "Let me in," and they didn't. It's funny how to get into an art school you have to already know how to draw. I find that to be very funny. I thought you guys were going to teach me how to draw, but oh man, I must be stupid. So I've chosen to sit down here because I'm an old ass man and I am a tired ass man, and my ass is grass, and this right here is just a little bit more comfortable for me. Also, another thing that I've noticed is that when the reference is kind of far away from me and the perspective is skewed on it, my brain doesn't course correct and I draw like the skewed perspective, and then I'll like stand up and look at it or something, and then I realize it's all wrong. But that's okay, because like I said, there are no mistakes. There are what. Actually, didn't Bob Ross say that? Didn't he say something like, it's like some kind of happy coincidences or something? I don't know. But whoever said it, they were right. And so what we're doing here is we're drawing a left-facing skeleton because that's one that I don't feel as comfortable with. For some reason, there's just the right-facing one is just easier for me. Things, for some reason, it's like an old shoe. It just fits, just slips right in. Whenever I get to the teeth, I find myself running my tongue over my own teeth and counting them every time. You'd think that I would just have memorized how many damn teeth there are in a person's head, but no, I seem to have to count them every time. And I'm pretty sure I still get it wrong. But that's okay, because I don't think people are, when they're looking at skeleton art, are sitting there counting the teeth. I mean, unless they're like a dentist or something. Because I'm sure that when doctors and people who went to medical school look at skeleton art, they probably look at it with a different eye, a more learned eye, so to speak, and they can tell, like, oh, that femur is out of place, or that ulna is not good, or that radial is wrong. And that's what I think bones are named. Alright, so this is going okay. The hat, I think I've made it a little too banana-y. One thing that's kind of fun when you draw is to incorporate more straight lines than curved lines. Kind of try to, like, when there's a lot of curves, kind of try to do things in more straight lines and split the difference using more straight lines. It kind of gives the sketch a bit more of a kind of a crisp look, because when you try and actually like mimic curves to how they actually are, you end up making everything like real bendy, and stuff just looks better angular. It's just a fact. Don't look it up. I mean, I don't know where you would look that up. In the dictionary of how to draw things. Okay, now that, so his hat's all wrong. I can tell that the hat's all wrong, but I don't know how to fix it. I just don't. There's some things that I'll look at it in the picture, and I'll look at it on the paper, and I just can't seem to make it the same. I don't know what it is. Sometimes there's just a disconnect, and I can't do anything about it. Be like, I know this is wrong, but I don't know how to make it right. And I think the only thing that can make it right is practice, where you have to just kind of sometimes just shut off your brain and let your muscle memory just kind of go to town. And sometimes when you're drawing from a reference, another good thing to remember is that it's okay if something doesn't look exactly like it does in the reference. A lot of times you can get too caught up with trying to mimic the reference that you are using without, realizing that it's good to have some artistic license in there and just, draw things how you want to, or how it's coming out, like it's fine. It doesn't have to look the same as that. As long as you can tell that it's what you're trying to draw, then, be happy. Let's see. I like the idea of a cowboy with an arrow sticking through the hat. It makes me happy, this idea. It evokes this sense of kind of carelessness and luck, which I like. It's this kind of like, I've been shot, but I'm still here, and I don't give much of a care. It's a good thing. not entirely sure how to draw a proper arrowhead or how big they should be or whatever. But, you know, it's, again, these are the things we were just talking about. It doesn't matter. If you, it's, art is kind of like, learning, it's kind of like learning a language. For example, when I was learning Chinese, I would try it out when I was living in China. I would try it out like on taxi cab drivers or whatever, and just to see if they could understand me. And at the end of the day, I would be able to have these broken ass conversations with people, and they could understand me, but I knew that I was saying things just wrong, you know? And it's fine because we still understood each other. The idea that I was trying to transmit would be ultimately, you know, transmitted, even though it wasn't quite, you know, right. It was still okay. And that's the same thing with art. You are transmitting an idea, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, if somebody can look at it and understand what you were trying to say or what you were trying to do, then you have achieved your goal, as far as I'm concerned. That could be I don't know, maybe it's a stupid way of looking at it, but I'm a stupid guy. Alright, so that's fine. We'll make that work. I mean, that works-ish. I'm not entirely happy with how these are happening, but maybe that's just my own issue, personal problem. I'd like to write something on the bottom here, like something to do with something, you know? There, I said it. And I really like scrolls, or like, you know, like a banner. I like scrolling banners. I think they have this very nice kind of aesthetic to them, where it works on many different things. Like, it works for medieval fantasy stuff, it works for Wild West stuff. Scrolls are they're just great, you know. And if it can say something funny, or, you know, inspirational or whatever, then even better. And what shall it say? What shall it say? Maybe he should be saying something. Speech bubbles are also very, very fun little things. It's easy to get hung up on trying to come up with something clever. I like the word howdy. I think howdy is it's a great word. I use it myself. People are like, "Hey, how you doing?" I say howdy. I think it's wonderful. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Howdy, stranger. So he's going to be saying that, and then the scroll will say, it'll say, "Be lucky." And you say, "What? Be lucky? How do you be lucky? Well, you think lucky, and then you are lucky. Because, believe it or not, the universe is what you make it. If you think that you're going to be unlucky or bad at stuff or you're going to die soon, you probably will. But if you think that you're a lucky person and that you're going to have a good life, you probably will. That's just the way that shit works. It's pretty amazing. Like, I always told myself that I'm the luckiest person in the world. And I honestly believe that. You know, I might not be rich or famous or any of that stuff, but I have a great life. I have a great wife. I have great kids. And honestly, that, you can't ask for much more than that out of life. Money and all that other stuff, it doesn't, people, I mean, there's that whole thing where you say, you know, you can't buy happiness or whatever. And yeah, it's much nicer to be rich than it is to be poor, granted. And I think that even if you are depressed or whatever, it's still nicer to be depressed rich person than it is to be a depressed poor person. You know, so, but what I'm trying to say is that money isn't gonna, you know, it's not gonna make you feel fulfilled, I don't think. It's what you, it's your actions, it's what you do with your life that makes you feel fulfilled, not what you have materially, because ultimately, when you bite the bullet, you don't take anything with you. And when you're laying on your deathbed, I think the only thing you're really thinking about is not, oh, how much money, how much Bitcoin do I have, or, you know, or whatever. You're remembering the good times. And if you didn't have any good times, then you're probably just laying there drawing a blank and then slowly dying. Alright, so we have a nice, fun cowboy man and a nice, fun banner which says, "Be lucky." What we do now, or what I traditionally like to do now, is to get some kind of pen. I'll probably use just a thin pen because I'm working on Bristol here. Wow, come on, don't do this to me. I'm working on some Bristol here, so I get myself here. All right. I'm using a micron pen here. Microns are great for a number of reasons. It is archival ink, and what archival ink is a certain type of ink that has been designed to not necessarily seep into the paper. It's designed to sit on top, and why that's good for me is when I do these tracings or whatever, I will, after I finish the ink, I will do a bit of an erase, and that will get rid of the pencil, but it also gets rid of some of the ink, and I really don't mind, you know, I think it's actually quite nice when it gets rid of some of the ink, because that way I can really get like a clean line going on the next layer. I had an earlier, well, actually maybe I never made a video about it. I think it was a story or something on my, not a story, but what are those highlights on Instagram where I outlined my drawing system. I think I called it poets. So pencil, outline, erase, and then trace, and then shading. So yeah, POETS. So yeah, pencil sketch first, then outline with a pen, and then erase, then trace over your pen outline with a good pen, and then shade the, the recesses or whatever. And yeah, that's just my system, and I'm sure a lot of other people use that system too. They probably just don't have as cool of a name for it as I do. When doing curved things, I know I was mentioning kind of, doing as many straight lines in there as you can. When you are doing large curved areas, it's much easier to use the way that your wrist moves versus trying to force it a different way. What I mean is that, like, if you put your wrist down on a piece of paper and you have a pen in your hand and you put the pen to the paper and you kind of just move your wrist, a natural curve will appear. And that's just because that's just the way your wrist moves. So if you're trying to do a curve in the opposite way, with like trying to draw opposite of the way your wrist moves, that curve it'll just be more difficult. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's okay to move the paper, it's okay to reposition yourself to make curves easier to draw. Which is funny because when I was in 3rd grade, we had this art lesson and I was drawing whatever the stupid thing that they told us to draw. And the lady who was leading the class got very annoyed with me because I was rotating my paper to draw the curved lines to facilitate, the ease, to use the natural way that my wrist moved to, facilitate drawing an easier rounded edges and stuff. And she told me that real artists, whatever that means, don't move the paper. And I found this to be so bizarre, and I disagreed with her, and her reaction to that was to tape my paper to the desk. And I had to complete my drawing with the page taped to the desk, which I did. It just took me a bit longer than it would have if it wasn't. But I will remember that probably until I die, because it was, even at a very young age, I understood how absolutely stupid this woman was. Because there's no wrong way to draw. And telling a child that they're doing something as innocent as drawing the wrong way is just insane. It's she should have been committed and put in an asylum or something. But no, she still walks free, I imagine. Teeth are something that are always really fun to draw. And what's great about teeth is that you don't always have to draw them in somebody's mouth. You can just draw the teeth by themselves. Teeth are simultaneously aesthetically pleasing and also quite creepy. So it's like it's a nice double whammy. They're just very cool. I used to like drawing rows of teeth as if they were kind of just floating in the air, like with all the roots and stuff. And it's fun to draw them from like different angles and such, kind of just like floating around. It's kind of neat. And the fissures in the skull, that's one thing that I still kind of do differently. I feel like every time there's not a certain way that I've decided that, oh, I like this way the best over other ways, which to me is just an annoying thing about myself, that I can't just decide how I like something, which I find is very interesting. It would seem very simple that to decide, what you like or how you like to do something, but it's incredibly not as simple as it seems. A lot of the time I feel like we as humans, we don't know what we want. We don't know what we like. We have to sometimes be told, hey, you'll like this, and then you do something and you're like, hey, I did like that. But you wouldn't have known if somebody hadn't told you, Or somebody will say, hey, this is a good movie. And you may have watched it before and you'd be like, no, that movie's terrible, but I'll watch it again. And then you'll watch it again and you'll be like, hey, this movie is good. I never realized that until, Jake Gilligan told me it was good. Thanks, Jake. Alright, well, with scrolls, it's always important to remember that a scroll should never, ever, ever, for any reason, wherever you're going, whoever you're with, whatever you're doing, for whatever reason, should never be pristine and without rips. Rips and rough edges give a scroll its character. And a scroll without character is like a roll of toilet paper. Just pristine and unused and so full of potential. And speaking of toilet paper makes great bookmarks. I know you've probably never thought of it, or maybe you have. Maybe you've been sitting on the john reading your favorite comic, and lo, you realize you are finished doing your business, but you don't want to lose your place in the comic. So you grab a little square, just one square of toilet paper, and you pop it in between those pages. And then you realize, hey, this is a great bookmark, because the friction that is created between the kind of soft toilety paper, it creates a nice little friction between the toilet paper and the pages of the book, and it'll stay right in there. A lot of bookmarks are kind of slippery, and they will slide right out. Not toilet paper, no sir. So use toilet paper for a bookmark. It's a great idea. As far as text goes, all text in images should always be Old English, without a doubt. But if you can't do Old English, then other text will do in a pinch. I can't do Old English unless I'm looking at it or have traced it from something. So I tend to default to some condensed block letters. That's usually where I land. I used to really like experimenting with drawing different style texts when I was younger. This is all stuff that I would do when I was, when I drew regularly. Like I said, that's where I hope to get back to, experimenting with different fonts and, just playing around, just making cool stuff. Ultimately, making cool stuff is very cool. There's no better feeling than having made something and then showing it to someone, and then somebody says, "Whew, that's pretty cool." You get that sweet, sweet validation. And then, okay, after you have finished the outlining portion, it's time to erase. But you have to remember that depending on what type of paper you're using and what type of ink you're using, you have to give it a little bit of time to dry. As I stated previously, archival ink sits on top of the paper. So it takes a little bit of time to dry, and it will smear if you don't give it that time. A good method of giving yourself enough time for the ink to dry is just to go make yourself a cup of tea. Grab a biscuit. Eat said biscuit. Bring tea back to table. And usually after that time, the ink will be dry and you will be free of making any kind of mistakes by smearing it. There's nothing worse than trying to get a clean line or a clean, really tight, little outline on a drawing that you're working on, and then coming along and just smearing that sucker for no good reason. You can also choose not to erase the pencil. I've seen people trace their, outline their work and then just continue inking on top of the pencil. And I think there's a certain method to that madness as well, because the underlying pencil sometimes adds a bit of depth, which is nice. Also, when you're erasing or when you're dusting your eraser scraps away, even if it's just on your desk or whatever, it's good to use some kind of brush, or even I sometimes would use, if I'm wearing a long sleeve, just my sleeve or a piece of fabric to kind of brush them away. Because when you use your hand, you sometimes will get your finger juices, our fingers produce oils, and sometimes you'll get a smudge or something just from your hands. And if you try to blow them away, that's not a good method either, because a lot of the time they're actually quite stuck to the paper, and when you blow, little bits of saliva will come out. You think they don't, but they do. Just try it. Blow on a piece of paper and try to blow away some, eraser shavings, and you will see little flecks of spit appear on your page. Unless you're some sort of angel who doesn't spit when you blow. Wow, I just realized that sentence was not good. So after you finish the preliminary erasing of the pencil and you take a step back and you look at your image, you can easily now pick out what parts are, need touching up, or what lines you forgot to ink and accidentally erased. Because that will happen too. Sometimes on especially complex ones, you may forget to ink a portion and then you'll just erase it. Alright. Howdy, howdy, howdy. The next step here is to take a thicker pen. I will be using, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, I want to use a brush pen. I like brush pens because they're great. I have these refills for my brush pens, and I've never used them before. So, first time for that. Let's see. Alright, I am using a Pentel Arts color, or not color brush, it's just an ink-filled brush. I really like using brush pens because I feel like they really teach you how to control your line weight. You can get a very thin line, or you can get a very thick line, depending on your control of the pen. And this is something that to me is very valuable, because it's like it's a pen, but it's also a teacher. One thing I find annoying about using pens on a wall, though, is that the ink, when you hold a pen, unless you hold it kind of like a psychopath, the ink will flow back into the back of the brush, which is not convenient, because you kind of constantly have to, shake it or tilt it or whatever. So right now, I'm just hoping that the way that I'm holding it will grant me enough working time to where I don't have to tilt it too often. And now that I'm wearing gloves while I'm doing this, and I usually don't wear gloves. Like I said, I just put them on force of habit from the oil painting. But I'm actually really liking the fact that I'm wearing gloves, because, as I mentioned previously, we have oils on our fingers and stuff, and sometimes I've inadvertently marked the page, or I'll have what's it called? I'll have graphite left over on my finger from, or on my hand from when I was drawing the sketch, and then I'll smudge something, and the graphite will mix with my dirty hand juice, and then I have this smudge on the paper that I can't quite get rid of, which is super, super lame. because, yeah, as much as I say there are no mistakes or whatever, a big greasy smudge on your black and white ink drawing is not exactly the most aesthetically pleasing thing in the world. Now that I'm on the tracing phase, as I like to call it, I'm really should only be focusing on just doing the outline. I shouldn't focus on filling in any of the dark spaces, like the eye sockets or the underneath of the hat, or anything like that. That will come as the last stage. And the reason why is because when you do kind of do filling in the big stuff, you want to do it from top to bottom, as I'm drawing this right now, because again, if you don't draw from top to bottom, then you are gonna have a bad time, because you will inadvertently put your hand into the ink at some point. You think you won't, but you will, and then you'll hate yourself and you'll cry, maybe. You probably won't cry, but you'll hate yourself, and you'll look at yourself in the mirror and think, who's that? Who's that asshole looking back at me? So just do yourself a favor, ink from top to bottom, and save the big fat inking for last. Also, I think it's nice to just get the line work done, and then kind of move on to the inking, because just looking at the line work can also help you identify where you're going to be, focusing your inking attention. Sometimes if you do it all together, you might realize, I should not have filled in that area there. Stan said I can't make mistakes, but I have made one, and I am furious. The good part about drawing the eyes like this is that I can kind of, instead of just having to trace the line, I can stay like within the line, and as if I'm doing an outline before I color something, so it doesn't have to be a clean line. It can be quite a sketchy little line there. With these brush pens, they do take a minute to dry though, and it's already midnight, and I do want to complete at least the line work and shading here. Also, I want to take a second to say thank you for commenting on my videos. Thank you for giving me feedback. I know it takes time to do that, and I don't expect everyone to do it, but what I want to express is my gratitude. It's hard enough as it is getting people to look at your work, but getting feedback is even harder. And so when somebody takes the time to leave a comment, I really appreciate it. I read all of the comments, and for me that's not hard, because I only get 1 or 2 a day, sometimes more, which is great. But what I'm saying is thank you, and keep them coming, and I hope you're not bored. Sometimes when I am working my regular job, I'll have YouTube on or some British sitcom on in the background. But when I'm watching YouTube, I often stumble across channels that utilize a lot of AI written dialogue and AI imagery. And it's basically like a slideshow made of AI images, and it's an AI voice probably reading an AI script about some kind of, esoteric thing. And I'll get because I won't always look at the video, so I won't always know what it is, but I can generally tell within the first 5 minutes if the video is going to be garbage or not. And usually these videos are, because they'll get you in with some kind of interesting caption about ancient manuscripts or this or that, or just some other kind of interesting thing. But then you realize it's just some AI reading an AI script about stuff that they probably stole off the History Channel or something. And I think about, okay, well, there's people who are making these videos clearly not because they care about the subject matter, but because they're, farming views in the hopes to make money on YouTube. And it's funny because I don't know if I could ever do that, just to, to make money. I think there are certain people who can do things that they hate or do things that they, don't believe in to make money, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to do it. Because I've thought about it. I thought, hey, I could ask an AI to, write some script about philosophy or things that I find interesting. So do it in a category that I care about, and then make, images, and then get some AI to edit it all together. But just the thought of making more AI generated content just for money just to me seems, I don't know, a little bit soul crushing. But like I said, I'm just a dumb guy. Maybe I'm not seeing the bigger picture. Maybe that would be the way to go and make money, and then spend the free time doing art. I don't know. AI stuff is pretty fascinating to me because it's getting so much better with each passing day, and I feel like there's going to be a point in time where AI imagery is going to be chosen over real photography every time, just because it'll be more vibrant, it'll be more editable more quickly, and it just makes me think of the future of just creativity in general. I just think there's so many people out there now who are utilizing AI to make, I guess you could call it art, and then putting that art on things and selling it. And those people aren't necessarily artists or have any kind of artistic, training, or have any merit in that kind of department, but they're making art and they're selling it regardless. It's just it's an interesting time we live in. I guess what I'm saying is I don't have anything against people doing that. I don't agree with it, but I'm not gonna say that it's wrong. Because it is what it is. That's just the way things are right now. There's no sense in being upset about it. If you can't change something, then there's no sense in being upset about it. If you can change something, then go change it, you know? But the way I look at AI is, I'm just interested to see where it goes. If it becomes sentient or whatever and decides to kill all of us, I don't think that's necessarily such a bad thing. Because as humans, we've proven time and time again that we can't take care of our own planet and we don't like each other very much. So what's the problem with an AI taking a stab at running the planet, It's kind of like the whole, for people, who believe in God. We were created in God's own image, and AI was created in our image. We're basically God, and AI is Adam and Eve or whatever. And maybe it's AI's turn to be the steward of the planet. And I have this idea that AI and nature would actually really get along, because I think that being a logical creature or a tool or whatever, it would understand that living in harmony with nature would be more or less essential to its own survival, which we as humans haven't quite grasped that yet. I mean, some of us have, but not as like a factual whole, not as something we can all agree on. Whoop. So yeah, I think AI is very, very interesting, and I don't have anything against it. And if it's, if people are buying AI art, and if AI takes my job as a designer, that's just the natural course of things. There's no sense being upset about it. I'll just do something else. I'll polish people's shoes, or wash dishes again, or go work in a restaurant like I used to. Now, onto something lighter. When drawing banners, it's always important to remember that there needs to be a curl at least at one end of the banner. If there isn't a curl, then make like a kind of those little triangle edges, so it looks like it was supposed to be like that. That's my banner advice. Okay. Now as my arm grows weary, I start to do the lettering. I think I've probably already talked too much, because I plan to put the voice track over the time lapse, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. One thing I really like about brush pens is that even when the line is shaky and you're not able to maintain one consistent width, it still has this lovely organic feel to it that you don't get when you use a liner. Liners are wonderful because they produce such clean lines and you can get very clean imagery. But with brush pens, you get this feeling of it just feels, more tangible more organic, more analog. I've had people look at my work that I've done with liners and they say, wow, this is a great print. And I say, no, this is the original. And they say, oh, I thought it was a print because it's so clean. I can't see any pencil or this or that. And then I'll kind of tilt the paper and I'll show them like, oh look, you can see like the shininess of like the ink and some of the strokes and whatever. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, a little bit. But that's generally the kind of feeling that people get when they look at very clean line work. I feel like the brain doesn't really register it as this was drawn on this paper by a human hand. I feel like it's this kind of more, wow, this is really cool. It's just an image on this paper, not necessarily hand drawn. Maybe it's a print kind of thing. Like it's just so clean. So when you draw something with a brush pen, no matter how, like even if it's really complex, it still has that organic look to where like it came out of a person, it was created by somebody's hand. I don't know if what I just explained makes any sense, but I hope it did. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Making Art in My Garage late at night. I don't think it's done yet, but it's looking pretty good. We'll finish this up tomorrow, and that is the day in which I will see you. I will see you tomorrow. How interesting. I'm learning so much.